Recently, we have been seeing some changes from the far left. This change has been especially evident on the topic of gender and sex. The far left idea that there is more than one gender came as a surprise, and even laughable to most people today. The reason is because most people associate gender with biological sex, but powerful forces in the left are working to change that. Why? Well, the reason may surprise you, and they're even written in their own literature, if you're only willing to read. But first, let's look at the history of the word gender. Gender comes from the same root word as the term genus. It's a sort of category. But for centuries, the word has simply been another word for the sex of a human being. The categories male and female. That was until the time of the sexual revolution and the rise of feminism. Feminists began to popularize another definition of the word gender. Why? Well, most people believe that men and women serve equally important roles in society, and that they should be both treated with equal respect. But feminists take this one step farther. Feminists believe that men and women are essentially the same. This is why you see far-left feminists like Lacey Green and Bill Nye claiming that there is no difference between male and female at the level of the brain. Yet at other times, leftists will say that men who identify as female, for example, have regions of the brain that are closer to the female sex. Many people have pointed out that this feminists are blatantly contradicting themselves on this point, but this has nothing to do with reason, of course. This has to do with a particular agenda, and that is blurring the lines between men and women. I'm going to show you a video that you've probably seen before, but let's examine this closely.
Number one, shut the fuck up for a second. Feminists do not want you to lose custody of your children. The assumption that women are naturally better caregivers is part of patriarchy.
To the feminist, the idea that women are naturally better caretakers is patriarchy. Basically, the idea that of feminism is that anything that differentiates men from women is just due to men culturally oppressing women. To a feminist, the reason men and women are different is because men brainwash women into being subservient to men by doing what is typically understood as the gender roles. This is why, while normal people see men and women as equal in the West, feminists see sexism everywhere. Feminists see boys and girls being different, and therefore they deduce that there must be some kind of patriarchal system forcing the girls to be different from boys. Have you ever noticed that boys tend to like trucks and cars, and then girls tend to enjoy things like unicorns and playing with dolls? Well, that isn't because boys and girls are naturally different, despite the evidence that it is. That is because women are brainwashed to be that way, so that women will care for men, by cleaning and taking care of their kids, while the men are having all the fun sitting in a cubicle or farming. According to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, feminists found it useful to distinguish sex and gender. This enabled them to argue that many differences between women and men were socially produced and therefore changeable. Gayle Rubin, for instance, uses the phrase sex, gender, system in order to describe a set of arrangements by which the biological raw material of human sex and procreation is shaped by human social interventions. Rubin employs this system to articulate that part of social life, which is the locus of oppression of women, describing gender as the socially imposed division of the sexes. Rubin's thought was that although biological differences are fixed, gender differences are the oppressive results of social interventions that dictate how women and men should behave. Women are oppressed as women and by having to be women. Now, this is essentially an attack on the Christian understanding of natural law theory of morality. Now, of course, we recognize that men and women are equal, but we also recognize that in reality, men and women are naturally different. In some ways, men are inferior to women, and in other ways, women are inferior to men because they both lack some good characteristics that the other has. But together, they complement each other and form a more perfect social unit. As the Catholic Encyclopedia states, the female sex is in some respects inferior to the male sex, both as regard body and soul. On the other hand, woman has qualities which man lacks. Consequently, each of the two sexes requires the other for its social complement. A complete social equality would nullify this purpose of the Creator. Evidently, the intention at the basis of the differences mentioned is to force the complemental union of the two sexes as a necessity of nature. Accordingly, notwithstanding the equal human dignity, the rights and duties of the woman differ from those of the man and in the family and the forms of society which naturally develop from it. This is exactly what radical feminists are fighting against. As Rubin states, far from being an expression of natural differences, exclusive gender identity is the suppression of natural similarities. It requires repression, and men of whatever is the local version of feminine traits, in women of the local definition of masculine traits. This is, if you ever heard of feminists say, oh, well, men need to express their emotions more, and they're being repressed by society and not able to cry or whatever. That's where this is coming from. But feminists seem to latch on to the term gender because they confuse the term equality with sameness. If men and women are not exactly the same, then they are not equal to a feminist. Hence, saying that men and women have different roles in society is just sexist to them. Ironically, the feminists are the greatest misogynists. They believe everything we have traditionally known as feminine to be an evil, oppressive social construct of the patriarchy. Feminists actually believe that women are not equal to men. They believe that females are equal to males, but to be feminine is to be inferior. The insanity goes even further than this, though. With the overthrow of natural differences between men and women, they hope to overthrow the moral basis of sexual relations found in natural law theory. The divisions of labor by sex can therefore be seen as a taboo.
There's nothing taboo about a sex too.
A taboo against the sameness of men and women. A taboo dividing the sexes into two mutually exclusive categories. A taboo which exacerbates the biological differences between the sexes and thereby creates gender. The division of labor can also be seen as a taboo against sexual arrangements other than those containing at least one man and one woman, thereby enjoining heterosexual marriage. The end goal here is total sexual freedom. This is why you have a sexual orgy between multiple types of ice cream cones in Bill Nye's episode on gender. The suppression of the homosexual component of human sexuality, and by corollary, the oppression of homosexuals is thereby the product of the same system whose rules and relations oppress women. To the radical feminist, the natural state is not a man and a woman being in a relationship. The natural state is to be attracted to all sexes. Rubin laments that human sexuality will never be completely natural.
Come on, it's natural. All natural cocoa.
The wild profusion of infantile sexuality will always be tamed. This is why Bill Nye's ilk thinks that it is actually good to convert the ice cream cone to a sex orgy. In the feminist mind, the straight white male is being liberated from the oppressive straightness forced on him by religion and society in general. Everything from feminism to gay marriage has nothing to do with real rights, at least not primarily. The feminist sees the institution of marriage as a social construct meant to impress women and homosexuals by forcing people to be straight and to have gender. The end goal here isn't to have equality between men and women, homosexuals and heterosexuals, and all 52 genders. The end goal here is to destroy, in their minds, the oppressive ideas of gender and marriage under the guise of equality. Ultimately, a thoroughgoing feminist revolution would liberate more than women. It would liberate forms of sexual expression, and it would liberate human personality from the straitjacket of gender. And so far, they are winning.